What's up, geeks and gamers? It's Odin coming out with a video, and today we've got the box office breakdown for the weekend of March 13th to March 15th, and we have got some crazy drop-offs happening this weekend. As you can see, coming in at number one this weekend by Disney, Onward is at $10.5 million, which you would think might be okay, but then you look at that last week drop-off, and you see that it has dropped 73% since last weekend. That was basically what the Friday numbers were showing us, but it has actually held out all weekend long. 73% drop off. That is an insane drop. Now, of course, we can definitely mention the fact that CV is having an impact on the domestic and especially the foreign box office markets. However, I think this film would have seen a drop off anyway because it was getting mixed reviews at best from a lot of audience members, and really not a lot of people want to go see this film anyway because it's an off-kilter Pixar Disney film that normally, Disney Pixar films tend to do very well. There's very, very, very few examples of Disney Pixar films not doing well, or even just regular standard Pixar films before Disney bought them, where they wouldn't do well. They've always had a financial incentive. People have always said, oh, it's a Disney Pixar film, let me go ahead and see that movie now. Not really happening for this film going forward, so it's going to be interesting to see what the numbers will be going forward nonetheless. We have coming at number two, I Still Believe, another faith-based film from Lionsgate, $9.5 million opening weekend, opening at over 3,000 theaters. Definitely a decent number to look at. Bloodshot, the new Vin Diesel action film, coming in at $9.3 million at less than 3,000 screens, so that actually had a limited release in comparison to a lot of other films. It was still technically a wide release, but $9.3 million, not a terrible number to look at. That's a movie that could potentially make its money back, but based on the market and the very tough market overseas right now, it could potentially be a box office loss as well if those numbers aren't able to improve. Invisible Man dropped from number 2 to number 4 this weekend, making another $6 million, a 60% drop off. This is actually the little film that could really. It didn't cost that much to make, and it is still making money. It actually added screens in its third weekend, and dropping 60% in its third weekend is probably it's compared to everything else in the top 10. This had the lowest drop off from week, had the lowest drop-off from the previous weekend. So that is something to be said. Again, people apparently are wanting to go see The Invisible Man right now. The Hunt, brand new release, a lot of controversy around it because it just kind of goes after everybody, but then that kind of makes it hard to enjoy when you're one of the audience members sitting there and you're on one side of the political aisle and you get attacked half the time. Doesn't really seem like a good method for making a movie, but that made $5.3 million. This is going to be a film that I think probably will end up losing money, because it actually costs a lot more than one might think for a movie like this. It seems like this should have been under $10 million for the production budget, but it actually was more than $10 million for the production budget. So the film, I think, could definitely see some financial losses because I don't think a lot of people have had their minds changed on whether they're going to want to see this or not at this point. Sonic the Hedgehog, as you can see, this is the reason why I think it's definitely fair to say that Onward's box office being affected by CV, because look at Sonic the Hedgehog, 67% drop-off, only dropping out of 676 theaters the way back, dropping 70% in its second weekend, so still in the 70s. The Call of the Wild, another 67% drop in its fourth weekend. Emma, 71% drop. Bad Boys for Life, 64% drop. And Birds of Prey, this is just number 11, but I wanted to mention it, 74% drop, not making $1 million after being out for 6 weeks, and it has now lost 1,159 screens. So this film is basically a guaranteed financial loss at this point. Let's go ahead and dive into the numbers. So Onward, as you can see, this number might update throughout the day because we are still waiting on some foreign numbers. But when you see this type of split, when the domestic box office is 60 and the international box office is 40, this is almost a perfect 60-40 split when you look at percentages. And to have 60% of your box office coming from the domestic marketplace for a film like this, for a Pixar film, for a big budget Disney film, is not a good thing, because most of your money is going to be coming from this juggernaut right here. And if they're not giving any money to you, and the domestic box office is also not giving any money to you, there's no way for you to make your money back. And this film, based on the numbers that I have right now, could be a $200 million loss for Disney. You heard that right, a $200 million loss. Best case scenario based on my numbers, $175 million loss. $175 million loss. Add that to Call of the Wild, already still being in a position to be about $150 or so million loss for Disney, or even at the very least $100 million loss. They're not making a lot of money this year, both on their Fox projects that are coming out under the new 20th Century Studios label and even their own movies. And I think that they moved Mulan for a wide variety of reasons, one of which being the fact that they put all of their eggs in the foreign market basket, and because the foreign market is a complete hellhole right now because of everything going on with CV, they're not going to make any money back on that. So if that lasts for a very long time, as I mentioned on my video on my main channel today, Box office is set to lose around $20 billion. That's right, $20 billion are supposed to be lost by all box offices, not just Disney, but all of the studios together because of delayed productions and a lot of other things. But Disney, I think, is going to be the one that's the most hit by it because they have put the most money behind their projects, and obviously we can see good for you. I still believe, coming in again, $9.5 million, this film is probably not going to make that much in the foreign marketplace. This is definitely a movie that a lot of faith-based people are going to want to go see. This is a film that probably will do very well on Sundays, for example, and as we continue to go through the season of Lent, might continue to actually do well every single weekend, all the way even through Easter. I can see this film being a pretty decent Easter performer as well, as faith-based films tend to be during that time in history. But we don't have no production budget on this film yet. I can't imagine it costs that much to make, though. So this film might be okay, even though it's coming in about, most of the films coming out this weekend are projected to have made 10 to 35% less than what the projections were. And of course, I would say a lot of that would have to do with CV, but I still believe might actually be okay. As I was mentioning, Bloodshot has not a terrible budget, actually. It only costs about $45 million or so to make this movie, and that's, from what I've heard from critics, that's one of the big problems with it, is that the CG is just not very good. However, it is made $24.4 million, and so it is not out of the realm of possibility for this film to make its money back, but it would need a lot more money in the international box office, which, again, I think it's going to become harder and harder as the weeks go by if the numbers continue to increase of CV cases around the world, and it needs to at least make it up in the domestic box office, which, if this sees another drop-off, again, this film might be up to $40 million at best next weekend, but even then, it would still need to make another $20-30 million in order for it to actually break even. As I mentioned, Invisible Man, $122.7 million. This is really very good for a movie that only cost about $7 million to produce, and about half of that to actually promote the film. So when you're looking at the overall cost of the movie being around $10 to $12 million for both production and marketing, making $122 million, that is net gain, net profit, very profitable film so far. Probably will be one of the most profitable films of 2020, especially because of everything going on right now. The Hunt, that new movie that came out, only made $700,000 in the international marketplace. That number might go up as we go on, but The Hunt is definitely geared more towards American audiences based on the premise of the film being based on basically left versus right and liberal versus conservative. So it'll be interesting to see if this is going to be able to make any money in the long run. I doubt it, especially with everything going on. Again, this was really the first weekend where we were really going to see some major impacts from CV. I can't imagine what next weekend's going to be, seeing that movies that were supposed to be released by next weekend are no longer coming out. And I think the more and more cases that become more rampant, and the fact that you now have people like Regal and also AMC has done the same thing, limiting their capacity by 50%. So basically, this is one of the reasons why also you might see some movies start to have financial losses, because you can't sell out a theater in this marketplace. They are basically capping it out. Regal and AMC, I've seen that AMC is doing the same thing, have basically made the point that they are going to not allow theaters to get past 50% capacity. And so they're going to sell those screens out. They're going to mark them as sold out once they reach 50% capacity. And so that's going to lead to a lot of films losing out on some money. Now, the only good thing that we can really talk about as far as what's going on with Regal and AMC is the fact that they are doing something to try and, curtail this to the best of their ability. But also, because the studios are not releasing those big releases anymore, they shouldn't really have to worry about this nearly as much. But then again, every market's different, so you might have a lot of people that are trying to go out because they want to at least do something during everything that's going on right now, especially if they're off from school and have kids, and the kids are off from school, and oh my gosh, I can't have my kids at home with me all day. You see where I'm going with that. Sonic the Hedgehog is almost at $300 million. I imagine once we get updated international numbers, that it'll be over $300 million. It's profitable, but it is kind of sad too, because Sonic the Hedgehog is a film that probably could have done much better. I imagine you would have to give this film another $50 million or so on top of whatever it ends up as to what could have been received by this movie if the things going on around the world right now were not impacted. Because remember, this film did not get its Japan release, it did not get its China release, and again, those are big marketplaces that would have added a lot more money onto this overall film. So it's kind of sad to see that happening, but we'll have to wait and see everything else. So again, looking over at my Excel sheet, as I mentioned beforehand about Onward, because Onward is at $101 million, and again, this number could change if international numbers come in and are updated, but it's not looking good. Even if this comes in at $120 million, it's still going to be a massive financial loss. So basically, the average loss that I have for this film is around $195 million in loss. So they cost around $300 million to make this film, and we really don't have an official production budget on this movie yet, because Disney hates releasing its production budgets. It hates telling people how much they spent on a movie. But comparing this to other previous Disney Pixar movies, around $200 million is probably what the production budget was. At the very least, $150 million. Either way, it needs to make around $500 million or so to break even worldwide. If that number, $200 million, is accurate. If it's 150, it needs to make probably closer to $400 million worldwide. It has only made $100 million in the first 2 weeks. That would mean it would need to make essentially 3 times as much as it's made in the first 2 weeks in the weeks coming ahead, which is almost impossible for a movie to do. Some movies are able to double their number, but to add even more to that, not very likely. So even if this were to double somehow, best case scenario would be it would reach $203 million worldwide, which means the best case scenario would be it would be a negative $177 million loss for Disney. So Disney, I think, as I mentioned, is getting the most hard hit by this because, as I've mentioned previously, when you look to movies like Call of the Wild, this film is currently at negative $126 million. I've not updated this number in a couple of days, but the projections that I have for this movie was that it was going to lose roughly around $100 million. So these two movies together, you're looking at almost $300 million losses already for the start of the year for Disney. Now, some people are going to say, okay, well, Mulan was going to be the next big, Mulan got delayed. Black Widow, that's going to be the one that Black Widow might get delayed at some point too. But they still got their theme parks. They're closing. So as you can see, it's really not looking good for Disney because they're losing out on their big moneymakers like the theme parks, and they're not going to be able to release their big budget films that are supposed to return huge money on their investment. And even though they have those movies, even movies like Mulan and like Black Widow, I think that there's a situation where those movies don't make as much as they projected, especially if they're going to have to start moving dates around and sharing weekends and Lord knows what else you could potentially have, especially if this is still something that's prominent across the world over the next month or two, which I think it probably will be, at least around the world, maybe not so much here, but we'll have to wait and see on that. You could see some major financial losses for Disney, and you're already seeing some major financial losses for Disney. But anyway, what are your thoughts about this? Do you think Onward is going to have a, success? Do you think that, eventually it's going to get released in all these countries, and then everyone's going to want to go see it, and it's going to be amazing? I just don't see it. It's not a big title film. It's not a film that everyone's trying to go out to see anyway. So this just, to me, came out at just the worst time possible because it was already going to be tough for this movie to make its money back. And I know Disney's going to spin this saying, the only reason why it lost money is because of the fact that it came out during the time of CV. And I'll say, no. You were already tracking before CV became very prominent to not make as much money. So let's just not try and skew that one way or the other here. So you can definitely say that you lost as much as you did because of CV, but not that the film was not successful only because of CV. Also, have you seen any of the films that have come out today as of this weekend? I still believe Bloodshot or The Hunt, especially The Hunt. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think that it was a good movie, a bad movie? What are your overall thoughts on it? I've heard mixed things about it. I heard that as a thriller, it's kind of fun, but it's just inundated with politics and it goes against the right and the left, but apparently more towards the end of the film seems to side on the position of the left instead, which is just kind of mad. What do you think about it? But let me know your thoughts about this and all they didn't talk about it. That's what happens sometimes when I talk too fast. But anyway, if you like this video, smash the like button, give us a subscribe. It helps us out a lot. You're all amazing, beautiful people. Go check out my channel, Odin's Movie Blog, for further analysis on the box office and for an full updated chart once we get the international numbers coming in. You guys are all amazing. Have a wonderful day. And as always, God bless.